It began with silence, the kind that feels heavier than sound. The candles in the church trembled, their flames stretching like they were afraid of what was coming. The pastor's hands were steady, but his voice faltered, as if some unseen weight pressed against his chest. No one expected a miracle that night. They came to pray, to remember. Grief breathed where words could not. But what happened inside those walls defied prayer, reason, and faith itself. The glass above the altar cracked. The lights dimmed. And through the trembling breath of a man of God, another voice spoke. A voice the world had buried, yet could never forget, soft, sorrowful, familiar. You Menglong. The congregation froze. The candles flickered wildly. The pastor's lips moved. But the words weren't his. Every syllable carried the echo of another life, one silenced too soon. One not yet ready to rest. Some called it possession. Others called it proof. But those who were there that night said the same thing. The pastor spoke. It was him. Welcome, reader. What follows is not just a story about death, it is about return. About a fragile line between the living and the lost. About a voice that refused to vanish even when the world demanded silence. Tonight, we revisit that night, the one that shattered faith, bent light, and made even the holy tremble. Because when Yu Menglong spoke through the pastor, the world learned a terrible truth. The dead don't always stay silent. It's supposed to be a quiet vigil, a prayer for a soul gone too soon. But that night, in the dim chapel perched above the mist-covered valley, something ancient stirred between the living and the dead. The candles flickered like nervous hearts. The smell of incense was thick, heavy with grief. The pews creaked beneath trembling hands folded in silence. Every face reflected the same disbelief. How could someone like Yu Menglong, the man of light, the face of youth and promise, be gone so suddenly? The pastor stepped up to the altar. His robes rustled softly. His breath steady but eyes weary. He had buried too many souls to count, but never one who seemed so alive in death. He began to speak. Brothers and sisters, tonight we pray for mercy, for peace, and for the light to guide the departed. His words flowed gently, a rhythm of ritual and reverence. But even as he spoke, the air began to change. A coldness slithered through the chapel. It was not the kind that brushed skin, it pierced. Candles dimmed one by one. Someone whispered that the wind was crying through the old glass windows. But there was no wind that night. Not outside. Then, the cross above the altar groaned. The pastor's voice faltered. His eyes flicked upward just in time to see the great wooden beam shudder, splinter, and fall forward, striking the marble floor with a thunderous crack that echoed like divine fury. Screams filled the air. The candles went out. And in the silence that followed, there was a sound, faint, human, impossible. A voice. Why are you afraid? The pastor froze. His throat constricted. He had not spoken. Yet the voice had come from his own mouth. His chest burned. Lungs fought for air. Who's there? Someone whispered. But everyone knew that voice. It was him. Yu Menglong. His tone was soft, trembling. The way he had sounded in his last interview, the one that aired 2 days before his death. But now, it carried something deeper. Like echoes from a place where time does not exist. I didn't leave, the voice said. All forgot so quickly. A woman sobbed. Another fainted. The pastor's knees buckled as his lips moved again, forming words that were not his own. They lied about me, the voice continued. They buried truth under light. The congregation panicked. Some tried to flee. But the heavy doors wouldn't open. They rattled and shook as if something beyond was holding them closed. The pastor's eyes rolled back. Hands lifted of their own accord. The congregation watched in horror as his body trembled. His mouth forming strange, fragmented syllables, as though another soul was forcing its way through his. One of the church assistants, trembling, grabbed a candle and tried to light it. The flames sputtered, then flared, blue, not gold. And in that unnatural light, they saw something behind the pastor, a faint shimmer, a silhouette. A man's figure flickering like a reflection in broken glass. You, someone gasped. The pastor collapsed on his knees. His voice cracked, splitting into 2 tones, his and another layered atop it. They used my faith against me. The spirit whispered. And now they will hear the truth. The floorboards groaned. The stained glass windows began to tremble. The great organ at the back of the church emitted a long, low note, though no one touched it. Then came a sound, static. Like an old radio tuning into another world. A few of the younger mourners had been filming. Their phones shook. The recordings filled with distortion and flickering shadows. In the midst of it all, a figure of light, faint, human, seemed to rise behind the altar. For a moment, every candle reignited. And through the blaze, they saw the pastor's face illuminated, but his eyes were no longer his own. Truth before peace, the voice said. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light vanished. The pastor fell forward, gasping. His congregation ran to him, pulling him upright. His skin was cold. Death shallow. What happened? Someone cried. He stared blankly at the shattered cross. He was here, he whispered. He spoke through me. Outside, dawn was breaking, pale and uncertain. But those who left the church that morning carried something colder than grief. They had heard a dead man speak. By sunrise, the story had already begun to spread. First, it was a whisper among believers, a miracle, they said. A message from beyond. But within hours, it leaked onto the internet. Someone uploaded a clip, blurry, grainy. Barely 30 seconds long, yet enough to shake the world. In the video, the pastor stood before the shattered cross. His face pale and eyes distant. The audio crackled. Warped, until that moment. I didn't leave, the voice said. The world stopped. In minutes, the video went viral. The comments flooded in, some crying fake. Others swearing on their souls that the tone, the rhythm, even the faint hesitation in the voice was identical to Menglong's. By noon, the church was surrounded by journalists. Drones hovered above the steeple. Reporters shouted questions no one could answer. The pastor refused all interviews. He locked himself inside the church, praying in a language no one recognized. That was when the second video appeared. This one was clearer. It showed the cross falling, the candles dying, and, for just one frame, the faint image of a figure standing behind the pastor. It looked like light taking human form. That single frame, you could see a face, half shrouded, half serene. Menglong. The world split in two. Believers claimed it was proof of the afterlife. Skeptics called it manipulation. But beneath the noise, something undeniable lingered, the sense that the line between faith and fear had been crossed. Inside the church, the pastor grew weaker. He rarely spoke. Barely ate, yet every night. Same hour the cross had fallen. He would wake and whisper one word. Truth. On the 8th night, he collapsed during prayer. The paramedics who arrived found no pulse for nearly a minute. But just before they declared him gone, he opened his eyes, and spoke in a voice that wasn't his own. They think they silenced me. Then, silence. He lived, but barely. His doctors said he spoke in his sleep, whispering names that didn't belong to him. Meanwhile, rumors spread. People who had been close to Menglong began receiving strange messages. Blank emails with only one phrase in the subject line, truth before peace. And one by one, those people stopped speaking publicly. Weeks passed. The frenzy faded. But the questions remained. The pastor, now confined to a small room beside the church, agreed to speak to one journalist, a woman named Liu Fei, who had once interviewed Menglong before his final film. When she entered the dim chapel, she found him seated by the broken cross, staring into the void. You were there, she said softly. You heard him. He nodded slowly. He wanted to be heard, not worshipped. Heard. Liu hesitated. Do you believe he possessed you? The pastor's lips trembled into something between a smile and a wound. Possession implies evil. What I felt was grief. Endless. Echoing grief, searching for somewhere to rest. He leaned closer. When he spoke through me, I saw what he saw before death. A light, blinding, metallic, and faces watching. He was not alone when he died. Liu froze. You mean? He made it look like an accident, he said. But it wasn't. Outside, thunder rolled though no storm had come. The journalist's recorder flickered, then shut off. When she looked back up, the pastor was still staring ahead. His voice now a whisper. He won't stop until the truth is free. The rain came 2 nights after Liu Fei's visit. It was not a gentle rain, it was the kind that hammered against the windows like desperate hands. The townsfolk said the heavens were angry. Storm was Menglong's sorrow finally breaking. Inside the church, the pastor lay weak and fevered. The doctors said his body was failing. But his mind, or something inside it, refused to rest. He spoke in whispers through the night, names no one knew. Phrases that sounded like memories. Behind the light, he murmured. Behind the lens. Liu Fei replayed a broken recorder over and over. The file had corrupted. But just before the audio dissolved into static, there was a whisper, faint, but clear. They made me disappear. She froze. The voice wasn't the pastor's. It was Yu Menglong's. The next morning, Liu drove to the city, to the very studio where Yu Menglong had filmed his final scene. The building stood empty now, its facade fading like a forgotten memory. But in the archives, found what no one was meant to see. A locked folder, marked only with the initials, EL. The contents were fragments, electrical reports, technical schematics, production notes signed by executives of the company that once owned Yu Menglong's image. One memo chilled her blood. Subject responds well to light exposure. Frequency range exceeding 32 Hz achieves transient behavioral compliance. Continue until final phase. Subject. Not actor. And below it, Yu Menglong's name. Liu's hands trembled. She scrolled further and found a list of participants. The head technician. Now deceased in what was reported as an equipment accident. And to unnamed consultants affiliated with a neural resonance project. Suddenly, the phrase truth before peace took on a different weight. Yu Menglong's final film was never just a movie. It was an experiment. They had used light to control emotion, to push human empathy to its limit. To capture purity for the screen. Something had gone wrong. The light didn't just capture him, it consumed him. And perhaps, even in death, he was still trapped within it. That night, as Liu reviewed the files, her computer screen flickered. Static. Then a voice. Fei. Her heart froze. She hadn't played any audio. Fei, tell them. The voice was faint, distorted, like coming through an old radio, but unmistakable. It was him. She whispered shakily, Yu Menglong. Monitor dimmed, and for a heartbeat. The reflection staring back wasn't her own. Eyes, sad, familiar, stared through the glass. Then, darkness. Power went out. When she turned on her flashlight, words were etched across her fogged window, as if drawn by an unseen finger. Behind the light. Meanwhile, the pastor had changed. Witnesses said he no longer seemed entirely human, his voice deeper, echoing. As though two souls spoke at once. He no longer prayed to God. He prayed with something. During Mass, he began reciting verses no one recognized. When he spoke them, the air shimmered. Candles burned blue. The same blue from the night the cross fell. Word spread that he could heal, not bodies, but memories. Those who had worked with Yu Menglong came to him, one by one, seeking forgiveness. And each time, placed his hand on their heads. They collapsed, screaming, confessing secrets they had sworn to take to the grave. We blinded him, one cried. He wanted the light perfect. Even if it burned him, another wept. The pastor would whisper only one phrase each time. Truth before peace. Then the candle beside him would extinguish on its own. On the 12th night, lightning struck the chapel bell tower. The townspeople gathered outside, watching as the sky split open. Through the roaring thunder, they heard a voice echoing from within the church, not one, two intertwined. The pastor was standing before the altar again, drenched in light. This time, he was not trembling. Night, he said, truth will walk among us. The air crackled. Every window vibrated. Came that voice, softer, clearer than before. They thought light would silence me. But light remembers. The candles flared. And out of the shattered cross, the one that had never been repaired, came a pulse of energy. Like the breath of something divine and furious. The congregation screamed, shielding their faces. But Liu Fei, who had returned to witness it, stood still. Tears streaming down her cheeks. Within that blinding light, she saw him. Menglong, not as a ghost. Not as a shadow, but as pure radiance. Walking toward the altar. He stepped dissolving into brilliance. And as he passed the pastor, their forms merged, man and spirit, flesh and light. Grief and redemption. When it was over, the church was silent. The candles had melted into pools of wax. The congregation was gone. Only Liu remained. Kneeling before the altar. In front of her, the pastor's body lay motionless, his face serene. But on the wall behind him, same phrase appeared, glowing faintly as if carved by the storm itself. Truth found peace. You wept. For him. For all of them. For a world that kills what it cannot understand. Next morning, the government sealed off the church. He declared it unsafe due to electrical damage. But those who lived nearby swore they could still hear the bell ringing, at midnight. Always 3 times. Every time it did, a faint glow would bloom where the cross once stood. Months later, Liu published her findings. The report was banned within hours. But by then, it had already been shared millions of times. Revealed the truth. Menglong's final film was not fiction. It was the first phase of an illegal light resonance experiment, testing how frequencies could alter consciousness. He refused to continue after feeling the light inside him wasn't his anymore. Days later, he died on set. The company was dissolved. The executives disappeared. But the footage remained, corrupted, fragmentary. In one frame, near the very end, was a reflection. A man's silhouette in the light. Not Menglong, the pastor. And in that moment, Liu realized the impossible. The spirit hadn't vanished, it had passed on. Years later, the chapel still stands, burned, untouched by time. Tourists come and go, leaving offerings of candles and lilies. Some claim they hear a voice when they pray, a whisper of warmth that says, "Don't fear the light. Fear those who use it." Say that at dusk, when the sun strikes the broken stained glass just right. Faint image appears, the outline of a man in mid-step, smiling, turning toward the altar. Menglong. He is not gone. Not truly. Because stories like his don't end with death, they end when the truth finally breathes. And though the pastor's name was erased from the records, remember still tell his story. Of the man who dared to speak with the dead. Of the spirit that refused to be silent. Of the night when light itself became a confession. And somewhere beyond what eyes can see, a voice lingers. Soft, eternal, grateful. Truth before peace. Silence follows. Not empty. Not fearful. But whole. Time moved on, as it always does. The world forgot, as it always does. But not everything fades. Some stories remain, not in headlines, not in archives, but in the quiet spaces of memory where faith and fear coexist. When the candles go out, when the last hymn dissolves into air, what remains is not darkness, it is the echo of truth finally being heard. Menglong's name is still whispered in the places where light trembles. Not as a star, not as a tragedy, but as a voice that refused to be buried beneath silence. He spoke once, through the pastor, through the storm, through every broken cross and flickering flame, and in doing so, he became something eternal. Because death does not end stories like his. It only makes them louder. If we dare to listen. To those who kept the vigil. Even when the world called it madness. To those who listened when others turned away. To every soul who understands that truth and peace are not enemies, but echoes of the same voice. Thank you. Thank you for remembering that not all light is gentle. And not all silence is empty. For even now, somewhere beyond the veil of faith and fire, the voice that once spoke through the pastor still lingers. Soft, patient, waiting. Whispering the same words that began it all. Truth before peace.